Hello again, everybody. Thank you very much indeed for joining us for the second talk. I hope you're enjoying the Motorsport Days live trade networking event so far. I certainly am, catching up with some brilliant people, some old faces and some new ones as well. So it's been great to network with people. I did say earlier on that I would be delving into the limit of my engineering. I'm slowly getting there. It's slowly looking like a Porsche. Hopefully it will by the end of the day, but I'm slowly getting there. But no, I'm fascinated in the next talk that we're going to be focusing on. Obviously, we are in the middle of an interesting situation in the United Kingdom with us leaving the European Union, and obviously the implications that Brexit is going to have on trade and commerce in general, including in the motorsport industry. And we're very privileged to be joined actually by Fujitsu's International Trade and Customs Practice Officer. He leads their program, Frank Dunsmuir, and it's fabulous to have Frank on board with us. He's going to give us a presentation to give us a little bit of the ins and outs of how things are going to be. He is the non-executive director of IBMATA as well, the International Border Management and Technologies Association. So we're going to hear an awful lot more about how the transition out of the European Union is actually going to benefit, hinder, and change and adapt the way we will move in and out of Europe heading into 2021 and beyond. Thank you so much, Frank, for joining us. It's been great to have you on board, and we're fascinated to hear what you've got to tell us.
Thank you, Jake, and thank you everyone for having me here today. I do have the same Lego set, by the way.
Oh, do you? Excellent. But if I struggle later, you can give me some tips.
It was built.
Excellent, excellent.
On the mantelpiece. So
thank you very much. Brilliant.
But thank you for having me here today. And it's really good to have the opportunity to talk to different associations, and in particular something as exciting as motorsport, which is also one of our real strengths in terms of British and UK industry, and in terms of our exports, our contribution to global trade, etc. I did notice the speaker invites or the invites for the session said exciting speakers. So you've got me, and my challenge is to talk about customs in an exciting way, which is no mean feat. So let me share my screen. I've got some slides that help me talk through some key points to talk about. If I can manage the technology, it worked yesterday. So hopefully you can see that. I'll just put that in present mode. So a handful of slides just to prompt me in terms of the flow in the process. And I thought what I'd do is a quick overview, because I know we've got an international audience here as well, in terms of what the Brexit thing is, where are we now? Transit is finished. What are the key implications of that? And then talk a little bit, try and bring it into the motorsport arena in terms of what might it mean for you. I'm not an expert on motorsport industry, but I've put together some thoughts about that, what it might mean to you, and some snippets at the end in terms of things that you might want to think about. It does depend on your industry in terms of what you do and what your role is and how you operate. But there's some general topics there which I hope you find interesting. Let me see if I can advance that. Oh, there you go. So Brexit, what happens next? The UK actually left the EU in January last year, 2020. We had a withdrawal agreement, which was quite an epic moment. So we agreed to divorce after 3 years of negotiation, and we then entered a transition phase to the end of the year, to the end of 2020. So that transition phase kept us aligned with the EU, and trade and all of our regulations and obligations stayed as if we were in the EU. So we operated as if we were in the EU. And now that we left at 11 p.m. on the 31st of December, we actually left the EU, and that introduced this lovely little scenario for us, which is we are now an independent customs union. So we are no longer members of the EU, and for the first time in 40 years, we now have a customs border between ourselves and the EU. There are other implications like people movement, services, etc., data exchanges, lots of areas that I won't cover. I'll just talk about the movement of goods and what a customs border means in terms of the Brexit scenario. So the important point there, I'll come back to 40 years. We've been moving goods freely between UK and EU member states, 27 EU member states. So then that comes to an end, which means after 40 years, there's going to be a bit of a knowledge gap, which I'll come back to. There's an important point on that chart, as well as the this orange or red line. In the top left there, you've got Northern Ireland, and Northern Ireland is the only land border that the UK has with the EU, which is Republic of Ireland, and it looks a little bit like this. If I can get to the next slide. There's the land border. Welcome to Northern Ireland. So this is you entering from Republic of Ireland. And as you may see, there's a bus stop, but there is precious little else. There's no infrastructure there. The tarmac does interestingly change in texture there, so I'm not sure. And the line markings change on the road, so that might give you a clue that you're entering a different region. There's also euros on the south, and there's pounds, sterlings in the north, etc. So it is a border. It's a real border, but there is no infrastructure there. So one of the complications we've all had is thinking about how do we manage a customs border with trade when there is no infrastructure between the two zones. So somehow we have to manage this particular situation. And Northern Ireland has been, or that land border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, being one of the biggest challenges. It's absolutely unique in the world. There is no other place where this kind of situation exists. So the net outcome really of the withdrawal agreement is something called the Northern Ireland Protocol, and it looks after this particular process. And essentially what it says is you can move anything you want between that border there. You can, once you're on the island of Ireland and your goods are in free circulation, you can move up and down without any declarations. So the nice thing is once you're on the island, you can move freely. So trade can exist as it does today between the north and the south, pretty much unchanged. The impact really is how we get goods into Northern Ireland. So there are some additional requirements now. If you want to move goods from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, you do have to follow some customs procedures, even though it's in the UK Customs Union. And that's to enable that border to be seamless, to remain seamless. So it's a little bit of an additional complication there. The other border with the EU is predominantly on the east coast. So most of our freight, land freight, of course, there's air freight and there's sea freight, but most of our trade with the EU is in lorries, and you can see lots of lorries there. This is the port of Dover, and about 10,000 lorries go through this port every day. That's about as big as it is. So if these lorries are held up or slowed down in any sort of degree, there's nowhere for them to park, nowhere for them to be held up in Dover. So it's critical that Dover, one of the main arteries of trade between GB and the EU, remains efficient and effective and is not backlogged or held up in any sort of way. You can see 3 ferries in the port at any one time. So I think they land about every half an hour, those ferries. So there's a tremendous amount of trade going through there, 120 billion pounds of trade. And right next to it is Eurotunnel with another 7,000 or so per day vehicles. So this is a picture of Dover before the end of transition period, while we were still aligned with the EU. And it's also a picture of Dover today. There's no change really in the infrastructure in Dover, no dramatic change there. So most of the processing is happening and checks will happen before or after Dover. And the obvious reason for that is you can see there's a roundabout and a single lane road in and out of Dover, and you really can't afford to put too much in the way of that flow. What does Eurotunnel look like? It looks like this. I won't go through this, but this is the French smart border system. So in order to manage the movement of goods from Great Britain into France, the EU, and in particular the French system, it's one of the main border crossing points for freight. And the EU have built this system. This illustrates an electronic system where vehicles are pre-registered and pre-notified before they arrive at Eurotunnel. And that pre-registration and pre-notification also happens in France. So the French system is also being informed that a vehicle is coming into Eurotunnel, and it's going to arrive in the next 60 minutes in Coquel in France, in the port there. And they will do, you may be able to see risk analysis over the tunnel bit there. So they'll look at the data and say, that's the vehicle we want to look at, and they'll flag it for inspection. So you've got 2 lanes coming out. So you'll be flagged for inspection, or you'll be pre-cleared, and you can go straight out of the port. Depending on the nature of the goods you're taking into the EU, it'll either be automatically stopped because it'll be food or animals and animal products, or controlled goods like chemicals and stuff like that. And this may affect some motorsport commodities as well, like fuels and products like that. Or you'll be pre-cleared and you can drive straight out. And as long as you've got your paperwork, you're allowed into the country. So they've got quite a sophisticated system in the Eurotunnel regime. The same process doesn't happen in Dover. So we've ended the transition period, and we now have in place, remarkably, just before Christmas, I think it was, a new trade and cooperation agreement with the EU, which was fantastic. So this is often called the Free Trade Agreement, which means we now have an agreement that there are no tariffs on goods moving from Great Britain to the EU and back again. So goods can move without any tariffs. That means there are no duties payable or anything like that. There's an implication there, which I'll come to in a moment. And importantly, the UK is able to negotiate and put in place global trade agreements. It's already done 30. So I didn't vote for Brexit myself personally, but now it's done. We've got to get on with it and move this forward. So it's a pretty remarkable achievement that not just a very complicated EU agreement has been made, but also we have over 30 global agreements already in place. And you've got some complicated regions like Mexico, Japan, Switzerland in that list. It's not, it's not minor regions. There are some sophisticated, high-value regions there in terms of trade. So we've done a remarkable job of putting those in place. But the implications, though, even though we have a free trade agreement, are important to be aware of. So first of all, there are customs procedures still. So even with a trade agreement, you still have to declare every single good that's moved from between Great Britain and the EU now. So everything is declared. That means today we do about 50 million declarations, and these are predominantly for things that come in and out of the country from the rest of the world. So if I'm importing from America or something like that, I need a declaration. We do about 50 million of those a year today. We will need to do 200 million. Some estimates are 400 million in addition to that. So you can get an idea of the nature of trade and the implications of that on between GB and the EU. The main implication of that is also in the next bit below there, you can see the sign, new rules are coming. So businesses need to know what a declaration is and how they make declarations for the different types of goods and the different routes they're using. Government needs to have more resources, more customs officers. There was public news, it's not Frank Dunsmuir saying this, but in the papers, and I don't know if it's correct or not, could be up to 50,000 more agents to help with border. And we need more customs agents. So many of us who will trade with the EU will probably not do our own declarations. We'll probably ask a customs agent or broker to do that for us and take the paperwork away for us. And if you think about it, we're staffed up for about 50 million, and we're going from anything to 200 to 400. So a bit of a leap there. Early casualty. This is where it gets exciting. You can't even take food into the EU anymore. So this was a recent bit of news. The BBC loved this one. Dutch TV network filming the confiscation of a ham sandwich from a driver. That is supposed to be a ham sandwich in that person's hand there, that tin foil. I believe the driver said, okay, can I keep the bread then? But he wasn't allowed to keep that either. So, and this is a very real consequence of leaving the EU. You can't bring food or product of animal origin, I should say, and plant origin into the EU now without the proper declarations and certificates. It may feel a bit odd from when you're talking about a sandwich, but it predominantly applies to food like fruit, vegetables, and meat products and livestock, etc. But that's an important complication and, if you like, consequence of the exit. So what does it look like if you're trading with the EU? I haven't listed everything here, but As an example, if you want to move a product on a truck from Great Britain to France or Germany or Italy or something like that, here's a short list of the main points you might need to take into account. And I'll come to a more detailed one with the particular motor industry. So you first of all need a safety and security declaration for the vehicle. So that informs customs that this vehicle, this registration number, is traveling to Dover on this date at this time, catching this ferry, and will land in France at this time, and it's carrying these products. And that's called the safety and security declaration, and that has to be approved before you can move the vehicle and move the goods. It does things like checks for controlled goods or restricted goods and stuff like that. You would need something called a GVMS entry, which is a goods vehicle management system. And that's a system that HMRC have put in place. And I noticed in my haste, I've left off the Frontier Declaration. So as well as the Safety and Security Declaration, you need the Frontier Declaration. So the Safety and Security one is about the vehicle and the contents. The Frontier Declaration is the customs declaration that says, these are the goods that I'm exporting. The GVMS entry pulls all of that together and creates one number that you present to P&O Ferries or Stena Line, whoever the ferry operator is, or Eurotunnel. The Kent permit is required to allow the driver to drive to the port and get through the port. So to get into Kent, you may need certificates for control goods like fuels, oils, licenses for animal products and foods. You may need excise control, an excise declaration if you're exporting excisable goods like fuel, tobacco, and alcohol. You may need to use the French smart border system. You probably will. I mentioned to you before, so you'll need to update them. And you need EU import declarations as well. So you need the equivalent. What you're doing going out, you need the equivalent going in as well. So it's a two-sided story. There are other processes and routes you might want to take, such as transit and ATA carnet and things like that. So this is by no means the big list, but this is a high-level view as to what sort of things you need to think about. I'm just noticing about 15 minutes in here, so I'll canter through to the important bit. So what might it mean for you? I'm not an expert in the motorsport industry, but I do think some of you move equipment around for events. So if you're moving from the UK to an EU event, how do you get equipment there and back again? Because you're not selling it. You can't just move it across the border anymore. You've got to have a declaration of some sort. If you are involved in the supply chain for accessories and parts, you may be moving those goods around the EU. You may even have to think about where you store those goods if you're running a customer's depot or a wholesale type service. So that now has a consequence. If you're currently sourcing from a depot in the EU, you're going to have to now use customs declarations to get them into the UK. So would you move your warehousing and your locations around to optimize your supply chain in that factor? Do also think about, will your customers still supply you? Some of them will genuinely say, it's not worth me doing it because it's only a £10 item and the cost of moving it, etc., etc. So there may be foibles in there. And if you're manufacturing and building a product, a car, an engine or suspension and stuff like that, and you're incorporating parts from around the world as well as GB parts, there are strict rules of origin that will apply. So if it's British parts, you can move it into the EU with a declaration without paying any duties. If it's got a combination of non-British parts in there or UK parts in there from different regions around the world, you may well end up paying a duty on that. So you have to be careful not to pay a duty to bring it into the UK from America, and then you pay a duty again sending it into the EU if you're not careful. So do think about rules of origin if you're a manufacturer. And then things to consider very quickly. You need an EORI number, which is if you are going to be an importer and exporter or move products, you need something called the EORI number. It registers you with HMRC that you are importing and exporting or moving goods. You might want to be an AEO status, authorized economic operator. It gives you special privileges if you're moving a lot of goods. If you're doing this a lot of time, you might want to apply for that sort of thing. Think about your first event or your first products or your first processes. So customs procedures, you'll need to move equipment. Who will do the admin for you? And do you have the resources to do this admin? If you're moving stuff on a regular basis, you'll need some resources to keep hold of stuff, not just declarations, but things like inventories, equipment details and licenses, keeping up with standards. So at the moment, UK and EU standards are aligned. They could vary for different products. Consider 88 Carnet. That's a special process that allows you to move stuff backwards and forwards without paying any duties. You're just going over there for the race meeting. You're bringing your car and your parts back again, but you need to list everything you're taking, and it's expensive. It's 250 quid a time usually. So you need to think about how you'll move stuff for an event. Speak to your suppliers on the right-hand side. If you have a supply chain, make sure you've got continuity and they can continue to supply you. Keep an eye on regulations, mutual recognition of conformity and assessment to say your part is certified for use, and rules of origin I touched on. And very finally, at the bottom there, make sure you've got some help. Customs expertise is in short supply at the moment. So if you are doing this, I'd advise you to start thinking about getting a customs expert in soon. And that's my little overview. I'll stop sharing that if I can. I hope that was exciting.
It was certainly very educational, Frank. Yes, I mean, what I've certainly taken from that as someone observing this for the first time is obviously make sure you're filling in all the correct forms. Get a customs expert on your team, on your staff, or certainly convene with somebody, and buy your sandwiches in Calais. That's quite important. Buy your sandwiches in Calais. It's a very important one. And I never knew that about the road between Northern Ireland and Ireland. I'm tempted to just go and have a look at it just for the fascination of it. It does look interesting. Frank, people will obviously have in-depth questions about this, especially if they are transporting and hauling goods to and from the EU. How can people get more information on this? How can they get a little bit more detailed analytical questions answered? What's going to be their best port of call?
I can send you a link that you can send out to the members. So there are several, you can do a search on the website, HMSC websites around readiness for Brexit. There are some excellent online guides and instructions and information, etc. I can send you those links so you can send out to the attendees. I think if you're new to customs, though, I would say overwhelmingly it's complex, and take some advice, because if you get it wrong, you get stuck. You can't get across, and it's unpleasant, it's unhelpful. And if you're not declaring properly, you're effectively breaking the law in that regard. So you want to make sure you're compliant. So get some advice, get yourself sorted. You might have to do it just once, and then you know what you're doing. It's a bit like a sausage machine. But do if you're not used to this, do seek some advice.
Essentially, it's a bit like having an accountant for EU travel customs, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly the same thing.
Excellent. Great advice, Frank. Thank you so much for educating us and giving us a little bit of insight. It was great listening. And I have to say, while I was listening, you were right. You were absolutely spot on. Yes, absolutely. Fantastic stuff. I like to do things while I audio process, but you're absolutely right. It does look the part. So I'm very grateful to you for your advice. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much.